So a couple of weeks ago, I talked about my thoughts on the new mixes that appear on Airborne, the recent box set from Camel. And, I put the new mixes in their own video because that was the part I was most excited about ahead of the release. Kind of, as much as anything, the reason why I bought the set, and I had a fair amount to say about them. But I did want to talk a little bit about the box overall as a value proposition, what you get by buying this if you're someone who already has the band's whole catalog. Now, obviously, if you don't have any of this material at all, or if you only have some of the band's catalog, then I can see, lots of reasons why you would buy this. It's kind of a must-buy, right? I mean, I think this is, I did a video called Every Camel Album is Great. I'm certainly a booster for their discography. But, presumably a lot of the people who think about buying this are going to be people who, like me, already have the reissues of the early albums on Decca from the early 2000s, the Esoteric Records reissues from the late 2000s. And those are pretty good reissues. They have good sound, good booklets, a decent smattering of live material included as bonus tracks. I've never felt like the band's catalog was poorly served in that format or like I missed anything having those versions. So if it weren't for the new mixes, I'm not sure that I might have bought this set, but I do have it, so I thought I'd just talk a little bit about how it adds value for people who already have those versions. As always, I'm Hans from Electric Brain, Electric Shadow. We are a contemporary art rock project mixing elements of prog rock, post-punk, and post-rock. You can find a playlist of some of my favorite stuff of ours in the description for this video, rather. So, first thing to say about this box set is it has 4 songs that really haven't had any previous wide release. They're either previously unreleased or as good as, for all intents and purposes. In some cases, they may have appeared on bootlegs or low-quality live versions or certain very deluxe versions, but they're not on the Decca/Esoteric reissues that most people are going to have. And the first of those is from the sessions for the self-titled album. It's a song called Sarah. It's sort of a folky acoustic little number, just a couple minutes long with kind of a snide tone. It's not very kind to the titular Sarah. Have a quick listen.
Sarah, oh Sarah, she is always there, nose up in the air.
So that's kind of a curio, very out of character for that album. Interesting, but not earth-shattering. Next, there's a song from the Mirage sessions called The Traveler. It does appear here in what's called a demo, but it's a very good sounding demo. It's very well played. It's just as listenable as a lot of fully mixed tracks from this era, and it is a great song. Really wonderful, a 9-minute epic with some brilliant leads, a really good underlying core of writing. It feels a bit more like an evolved blues. The instrumental feels a bit more like an unstructured jam. It's not as creatively written or as tightly written or as energetic as the other things that are on the album Mirage. It's probably not at the same level, and you can see why it wasn't chosen for that album, but the quality of the playing, the goodness of the writing, the pleasure of hearing these 4 people working together on a composition that we don't know before is great, right? Very, very enjoyable cut. The qualities it does have more than outweigh the ways in which it's maybe a little bit more stylistically generic or loose than the other things they did in this time. Here's a bit of the main vocal section.
All my life I've been the traveler, searching for a place called home. When I think that I found somewhere.
Here's a bit of the instrumental section at the end. That's a great song. I was very pleased to have that. There's another track from the Mirage sessions called Autumn. It's fairly quiet, 4-minute-ish atmospheric piece. It's a bit simpler than the rest of that material, and again, I can see why they might have felt like it wouldn't have fit. Maybe it feels like it could have been developed a bit more with a smidge more time. Maybe in this demo, I think it might be played like 5% faster than is ideal for the material, but those are pretty minor quibbles. It's a really nice mood piece. It's a really interesting thing to have come to light. I was very glad to hear it. Have a quick listen.
The winding lane to journey's end.
And lastly, we have a song called Riverman from the Snow Goose Sessions. It sounds, from the booklet, I believe that this was originally meant to be connected to an earlier idea that they had for the album where it was going to be based on Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. Take a listen to the song Riverman. Now, honestly, I don't know if I hear as much in this one. You know, it's always a pleasure, of course, hearing these four musicians together, but the song is sedate and quiet without actually being pretty. The writing feels kind of minimal compared to almost everything they did in this time. Not as blown away by that one. Now, is it worth paying $200 for these four songs? I mean, that's kind of hard to justify unless you have quite a lot of budget for prog rock, but you know, if you're interested in the remixes as I was, then this does serve as a nice addition to kind of sweeten that pot. Now, next I want to talk about one place where this set, honestly, I think kind of blows the chance to add some value for people that already have their individual albums, which is the booklet. Now, the set comes with a big, glossy, hardbound book that is, taken on its own terms, quite beautiful, right? It is a nice piece. Except that there's one big problem, which is that the essay by Mark Powell is just the booklet essays from the individual Decca and Esoteric releases blended together into one long essay, right? And as far as I could tell, and I did have a pretty extensive look here, all the photos in this booklet are the same photos that appeared in the booklets for the individual releases. So while the presentation is very nice here, the actual content is going to be very familiar to anybody who bought the earlier reissues and read the booklets. Now, I get that there are probably only so many archival photos of this band that exist, right? Maybe they couldn't find any more that were any better than the ones that were chosen or any different significantly from the ones chosen originally. I get that, you know, the Powell essay is a perfectly good way of telling the story. There's nothing wrong with it, but you know, it really would have been great if they could have just done one more Latimer interview, and just anything to kind of add some perspective and text that didn't appear in those earlier releases. Next up is the new masters of the original mixes. Now, I first listened to the remasters on their own without doing a side-by-side. Really didn't notice anything that seemed drastically different. And, you know, the masters on Decca and Esoteric, frankly, have always sounded great to me. You know, I've never wished I had anything else. But, you know, I thought it would be interesting to do a few side-by-sides anyway. Maybe there's something we can find out this way. So here's the opening of the first album, first in the original master. Now in the new master. Yeah, I have to admit I don't hear much difference there, frankly. Let's jump ahead a few albums, try something from Rain Dances, something a bit quieter so we can maybe hear how the quieter stuff is handled. Here's the old master. Now here's the new master. Not much difference I can hear there, you know? Let's try a loud part from a later album. How about the song Wait from I Can See Your House From Here? So I guess if you don't take anything else away from this video, it's that those early to mid-2000s reissues sounded really good, were very well mastered, really couldn't be improved on, which is nice to know in its way, particularly if, unlike me, you didn't spend $200 on this box set. And just kind of an interesting thing here, I've put the old master of Wait into a DAW, the new remaster from this box. You can see here visually the beginnings are perfectly lined up. If you can play them, you can hear they're in sync. But by the end of the song, you can see that they've drifted apart a bit, with the same visual shape in the master happening about a second later in the new one than the old one. If you play them side by side, you can hear that they've gone out of sync. So there's a very, very slight differentiation here. You know, they start exactly lined up and kind of drift apart. Not so much that you'd ever notice it without putting them side by side like this, but I assume that this is something to do with, you know, the inevitable variation involved with pulling things from analog tape. Totally a guess. I don't know that much about these processes. That's just the explanation that makes most sense to me. It's an interesting effect. If nothing else, I suppose it does prove that these are, in fact, new masters, despite really sounding pretty much identical. Now, lastly, we have the live material. I'm not really going to go into great depth here, but I'd say probably about 3/4 of the live stuff does appear on the aforementioned reissues from 10 to 20 years ago, including the live album, A Live Record. To be fair, though, you know, in that context, you might have one show split up across multiple dates. Hardly any of the shows are, well, none of the shows are complete on those discs, whereas here you get the whole set list with the intended pacing and momentum, rather than the songs kind of piecemeal spread over a number of albums. Now, I rarely, if ever, listen to the live bonus tracks on the reissues, but I can much more readily imagine putting on one of these discs, settling in for a whole front-to-back show, than, you know, getting to the end of Mirage and having a couple live songs tacked on at the end or whatever. So it is better curation of the live stuff, I think. I do appreciate having it, even though, once again, you know, I've ended up paying a fair bit of money for something that, you know, I mostly had already. So what's the final word here? I mean, you know, having made the purchase, partly because of my interest in the remixes, partly for the new songs, partly because of the bottomless need for content for this channel, I'm actually pretty happy to have it around. It kept me busy for a few days going through it. It was an excuse to re-listen to all those great Camel albums that I do love. I'm looking forward to coming back to the remixes. I did really find those quite engaging. I am looking forward to more time with those. It'll be good, like I mentioned, to hear the live material in its kind of full show context. And that's something that I will come back to a lot. Those two things in particular are things that I'll come back to, I think, a lot as a listener in the next few years. As far as the albums, you know, I'll probably keep listening to those on the discs that I had before, because it's a lot easier to do it that way than to screw around with box set packaging, and the remasters here really just, frankly, seem pretty pointless. That being said, while I am glad to have all this stuff around, and it's a nice thing to kind of hold and look at, I suppose, I do recognize that it probably wasn't the smartest use of my money. It's hard to recommend it to people who already have those earlier reissues, if you don't have your own YouTube channel to take up time on, or if you're not a huge fan of Stephen W. Taylor's remixing work. I suppose, if anything, it is a tribute to the quality of those early to mid-2000s releases, that the sound was so good, the booklets were so good, the selection of live bonus tracks was so good, that there actually just didn't end up being that much to be added. So it's nice to discover, I suppose, that the band has already been so well served, particularly if you already have those reissues and you feel like saving some cash. Thanks for your time. Hope everybody has a great week.